Tales from the Midpack. I'm your host, Rebecca Hunt, bringing you stories from everyday runners, experts, and hopefully some race recaps. Today we have the amazing ball of energy that is Emma Freer, a runner and a physio. Welcome, Emma.
Thank you.
The reason I asked you on the podcast is not only like you're my physio, so I get to talk to you and say, hey, you want to come and talk on my podcast?
And I can talk. And you can
talk.
Yes, we can both talk.
Very good at talking. But I really just want to find out about the common things that you see with runners physically and mentally. But before we get into that, for people who don't know you a bit, hear a little bit about you. So when you're not running, what are some of your favourite things to do?
When I'm not running, I do spend a lot of time running. I work part-time at Form Physio, but I also work in a pain clinic, so I'm dealing with people with persistent pain. I'm currently building a house, so that occupies a lot of my time. I also love painting, so I don't do as much as what I would like to do, but my best subject at school was art. So I really want to spend more time painting.
Awesome. What kind of painting do you do?
I prefer just acrylics. I haven't done oil painting, but just anything colourful and bold and what you can't get out of photography, I think you can put in in colour, in a story, in painting.
Oh, wow. So I'm learning about you too. You've done a few trail running events around the state.
Yes.
What have been some of your favourites?
My favourite so far, I think, is probably the UTA, so going a bit further abroad. But I saw a trail running competition when I was in Spain, when I was travelling overseas, and saw all these people.
Was that your 4 months of running that you did?
Yeah. So after living in the UK for a few years, we travelled in our van, and then we were in the Spanish Pyrenees, and we saw all these people with this buff thing written on their head and all these colours and we were like, oh, what's this race? And I think they were running 100 Ks across the Pyrenees and thought, whoa, that is pretty amazing. In the end it poured with rain and they all had to get, half of them had to get airlifted out. But that was kind of my first insight into, wow, trail running is this amazing sport where anyone can really do it.
Yeah.
And you can just show up and see what, becomes of it. So I started trail running here, and then we got a group of friends together and went to the UTA, which is the 22 last year. That was probably my funnest physical challenge, I think.
That's cool. You have a sprinting background, competing in national athletics. So I did a little bit of online stalking. And I did find a 100-metre result from Valentine's Day in 2010. Where you did 100 metres in 12.18.
Yes.
Yeah.
That would have been one of my final performances, I think.
I think it had PB written at the top of the page. I was like, oh, wow, that's pretty amazing. And your sprinting background, I think you said in your description on your physio page, is your inspiration for getting into physiotherapy.
Yeah, it definitely was, through being injured all the time. So I learned the hard way, I think, and started probably training for sprinting when I was about 12. I said to my mum, and I distinctly remember saying this, I will never be a runner if I have to train more than 3 times a week because I like doing other things. And so somehow that eventuated into getting a coach, training probably 6 or 7 days a week, competing for maybe 10 years in track and field. I travelled and competed nationally for many years until physio and work life took over, and I was still doing that, and then I moved to the country and there was no athletics track and thought, what can I run on? And then park run started and thought I could run on the park run track.
Awesome. That was the New South Wales you did 2 years in the country.
Far south coast New South Wales. Beautiful spot.
Cool. So you have a bachelor in physiotherapy, and we're now at Form Physio, where you work on Gilles Street, and I'll put details of that in the show notes at the end if people are interested. But I saw in your description that you've described being a physio as being a detective, and I know that I've come in here with vague symptoms and not being able to actually trigger anything while you're actually looking, and just imagining, it can be really like being Sherlock Holmes. Like, what on earth is going on here?
Yeah.
If someone is going to see a physio, how can they help that discovery process?
I think we ask people to be open-minded. So I think you can be really observant about your body, and that can be a good thing, and that can be a detrimental thing. But being observant and being open and being able to look and delve deeper into your own thinking and your own habits kind of allows us to put and piece together not only the physical and then the other, we say, like psychosocial components of pain and problems.
Yeah.
And like for a lot of us, I think we feel as though injury is always due to some sort of tissue-based pathology.
Yeah.
But with what we know about pain and how pain manifests is that sometimes we can have not much pathology at all. This manifests in running as well, but commonly I would see people that are, probably having training errors. And so I think the biggest thing that I spend time with people discussing is what are the nitty-gritty components of their training.
Yeah, so what kind of components seem to be culprits in this detective story?
Well, the things that I would see happen most commonly are probably people getting into running, getting really excited. I've done this, so I think I've got a good detective eye for it now. And going, I feel really great, let's start doing it more and more and more. And then finding a little pack that they're happy running with, and then they start training more and faster, adding interval sessions, and we've built up this loading really, really quickly, whether that's load in the form of extra Ks, whether it's more incline and hills, or whether it's more speed. We have to look at all those different variables. And we don't really have a perfect answer for what that should look like, but from the research it's kind of looking like building up more than 20% per week is an increased risk of injury. And the catch with that is often people won't come in injured at that time, but about 2 or 3 weeks later down the track.
Okay, so if you look at someone who has an injury, if you go back in their history over the last month, there'll be something that you see where you're like, oh,
most commonly
there it is.
Yep, in terms of
increased load somewhere in the past month.
Yeah, and that can be an increased load, or it can be a spike that's come after a decreased period of loading because we get sick, life happens, we might have had to do less for a period of time. Then everything's feeling good again, and we go, let's jump straight back in where we did before. And I think lots of the time people work that out and they taper it, back to where they were before, and we don't see those sorts of people. But I think training errors, of all the factors that contribute to running related injuries, are the thing we see the most commonly.
It's too much too soon. Essentially. Now you said you've talked about psychosocial. You talk to people a lot about their lives in addition to running. So if too much load is kind of a physical reason people end up here, what's some of the other external factors that play a big role in bringing people to injury? Yeah,
I think one of the good questions to ask ourselves are, why do we run? And I will often ask people that question. And
that would be a tough one to answer.
It is a tough one to answer. And I don't think it's one that we always get truthful answers for. And I think about my own reasons why I run, and if I'm probably really honest, it's to stay fit and feel healthy. And also just because I've always done it. And so when someone asks that question, you go, actually, I don't really have the best answer, I don't think. And so it comes down to what you want to get out of running. And for some people, I think they run and really push themselves into the ground, when really, if the goal is to just feel fit and healthy, and, maybe that's not necessary. So, and then I meet other people and they run for mental well-being and getting outside. And so just being able to do that and zone out is really, really important to them. So to have an injury come and threaten that is a huge, big thing for their system that can evoke this really rapid, and sudden kind of spike in their fear response. And we get more cortisol, and we get more stress hormone, and then any niggling thing, get
all the inflammation from the stress.
And we get
bigger than Ben-Hur.
True, and we probably get those true physiological side effects of inflammation, of tight muscles, of all of that. But there can be some contributing factors that might be coming from not just training and not strength or flexibility or anything, but what else is going on.
It just I remembered while you were talking then, seeing a physio once when I rolled my ankle, and I felt quite embarrassed when I was in the office because it really doesn't hurt as much now. And she was saying that's actually really common, your brain has been using the pain to protect yourself, and that now that you're here and something's being done, it feels like it can back off.
That's it.
And that was a new concept for me at the time, and I think perhaps with your pain management background here, that you might shed more light on that and know more aspects of our psychology that affect how we feel the pain.
I think one of the things that we tend to do is we get that white coat syndrome. Is like, we're doing something about it. Now my pain system can just, settle down and I can get on with it and move on. And what I see my role as a physio is doing is kind of excluding diagnoses. So if someone comes to see us, we've got to test things structurally and rule out that it's not something concerning, and rule out, in runners mostly, that it's safe to run on. Rarely would we have people where we have to stop them running, which is good because people can keep doing what they enjoy. And the one thing that we do stop people running on is stress fractures or risk of bone tissue injury. But generally we can keep people running just by changing their loading some way or another. Yeah,
that's fantastic. If you go to a physio that's not a running specialist, usually it's stop what you're doing at least 6 weeks, and you get banned essentially from running. I remember being shocked hearing your very famous catch cry in here, play on.
Play on. And I think we're hope bringers, hopefully. But it's, I guess, knowing when the pain is something that we have to really step back away from, and when is it safe to play on.
Is there any guide to that with the sensations that you feel with pain, kind of things you're feeling for in your body where, that's a pain I need to push through, or that's a pain that is telling me to stop. I know it's not easy and I'm learning, but are there any key signifiers?
The key things that we would screen for, and we call them red flags, are all the nasty side effects of something that's a bit more insidious. So if something, if we've gone over your loading, or if nothing's really changed and this has just come on all of a sudden, and it's not going away at rest, it's worse at night time, it's even there when you're walking, that's something that we start going, it doesn't really relate to higher loads. The bone stress symptoms are common with even low loads. So if someone's been having these progressively worsening symptoms and it's in a body or a bone area that gets a lot of load and impact force with running. So I guess the ones that we are screening for most are like in your foot, in your forefoot or in your midfoot, along your shin, and the common ones that I would see are probably a bit more hip or femur, and also sacral stress fractures. So we have kind of we're always screening for those, and the pain would be getting worse, not better. And worse the more you run, but even so with walking. But the severity of pain is not a very good indicator of damage. So I would get people when they're going back to running to use their pain severity as a bit of a measure of how they're tracking. And I'll generally say to them, well, if it's less than 6 or 7 out of 10 and you're running a fairly low effort score with that and it feels good and the next day it's good, that's okay. Play on. So it's just listening to your body and reflecting on, am I worse the next day and limping more, or, is this something that I can work through? The ones that we would see most commonly are, generally anterior knee pain, lateral knee pain, Achilles pain. I'm thinking they're the most common ones with runners. And for a lot of those conditions, when we rule out any nasty signs and symptoms, we can come up with a diagnosis that is pretty broad, which is often good and recommended in current medicine. It allows us to kind of retest our hypotheses along the way. And with a lot of those things, we can say it's safe to have some pain up to that kind of level. And even with tendons, it's safe to run with some pain.
Because I think that we get treated a lot like we're crazy. If we have any pain and we're still going. But if you become sedentary and you're not using, all your muscles or your tendons and just letting them just sit there and get tight, that can be its own damage. Is that?
Definitely. Well, it's the risk and the reward, I think, of stopping running and resting or getting back into something that, gives you a huge array of health benefits for your whole body system.
Especially trail running when we get out in nature.
And so it's always that balance between what's the risk and what's the benefit of getting back out and trying. The people that I see struggle the most recover from injuries are those that are yo-yoing between, having a niggle or an injury and then resting for a period of time and then experiencing pain again, and then getting worried and not getting assistance, and then doing it again.
Okay.
And really, the least amount of time we spend doing that, the better.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's not easy to navigate some of the information out there.
No.
But I guess excluding all of the concerning pathologies, then rest is really not best.
Okay.
Rest is often not best.
Okay.
Finding a load that works.
Yeah.
And running, if you have to back off your loading, you just run a little bit slower, or you can modify all those factors. So instead of us say, let's refrain altogether, think about the factors, how do you reduce your load?
Less distance or less hills.
Yeah.
Anything like that.
Yeah. So one of the other things I'll look at, I didn't mention before, is like heart rate and what's going on in some of those runs and how hard are you working with them.
Yeah.
Because I think that's something that doesn't get brought to the fore too much.
Yeah.
And some research is being done in Adelaide with runners all over the world and elite level runners and novice runners, and comparing injury statistics in those two groups and looking at why elite runners have less injuries.
Okay.
Because one of the things we know about injury risk in runners is that you are more likely to have an injury if you've had one before.
Okay.
We don't have a lot of research that says that strength training prevents injuries or that certain type of running prevents it, but we know elite runners are less likely to get injured than novice runners.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the study is looking at what people's heart rates are doing in their runs and getting them to report things like their rate of perceived exertion during the run.
Oh, was that advertised on one of the TRSA nights?
Could well have been.
Because I think I was on that and I was religiously filling it out for months, and then I did stop.
Yeah.
Life got in the way, but hopefully it gave them some data.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what they're thinking is that these novice runners don't respond, I guess, to their body's symptoms in the same way as the high-level runners.
In terms of being able to read their body? Feel what's happening?
I think the biggest thing is like fatigue and overtraining, and whether that's because elite runners have a bigger team around them that's assessing that data or not, there's going to be a lot of factors, I think.
Okay.
But tracking heart rate can be another good way at looking at how hard you're working. And if we're spending a large proportion of your week or your training in a high heart rate zone, you're more at risk of probably coming a bit unstuck. Yeah.
Do you know off the top of your head when they're looking at releasing results from that study?
I don't know.
No.
Because I think there's some international, there's some very high level runners.
It could probably take a while.
Yeah, but Michael Nitschke is running that.
That's the guy.
Study.
That's the one.
And he works at Spark.
One of the things I saw you mentioned in your description is that sometimes people come in with, and they have pre-existing beliefs or misconceptions that get confronted when they come in here. So I was really interested in asking you about that. What are some of the beliefs and misconceptions us runners have that we sometimes need retraining on?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And these are hard ones to answer with people in the clinic who have had a lot of affirmation about these beliefs for a large proportion of time. But I think one of the ones that comes up a lot is footwear. Does footwear contribute to injury? And really, there's a fantastic podcast by a sports scientist. I think it's Ross Tucker, and it's fantastic. And I like what he says in there, where he says, you could throw 2 pairs of running shoes to your dog, and you've got just as much chance of your dog bringing back one that's going to be comfortable and suitable for you than you do of picking one yourself. Right. And I think they say on average, about 2 or 3 different types of shoes it will take through purchasing them to find one that you like. But I think we're sometimes good at trying to find any of these little external factors that might be contributing. And certainly, you don't want a shoe that's really worn out, and it's worth checking that. But generally, if you've got a comfortable shoe, it's unlikely to be a cause of injury.
So not as important as we think, or as marketing would have us think, perhaps?
Definitely, yes. Yeah.
All right, so shoes is a misconception.
Shoes is a misconception. Do what feels comfortable.
Is there anything else you have to kind of retrain runners' brains on?
Along the shoe line is probably the orthotics line. that comes up a lot,
Yeah.
where there used to be a belief that pronation was bad, and that it caused injury.
Yeah.
And, of course, there's multiple factors that can contribute to shin pain and to foot pain and all these sorts of things. And both shoes and orthotics can be fantastic at changing your biomechanics, changing your loading, and we could use that as a tool to help you with your rehab.
Yeah.
But as a causative factor, we don't really have anything that suggests that pronation is bad. And you can really, I think, sit at a marathon, course or a trail running course and watch everyone and just go, well, there are, thousands of different running techniques.
Yes.
Yeah. And technique comes into that, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's no one size fits all best technique. We would talk with technique and we definitely assess technique, but it's mostly to exclude things and rule things out. And mostly looking at, are we loading forefoot bones excessively? Like, are we running on our forefoot more than we need to, which is putting stress that we don't really need.
Yeah.
But in terms of performance, there's some optimal things, but we don't really have any research to say that it is directly linked with injury.
So pronation is not the devil.
Not the devil. Nah.
And I think that's something that is a common belief. If you do that, then you're wrecking your ankles.
You actually have to pronate. So if you do slow down a runner, as we first contact the ground, we're in more of a supinated foot position, but then as we toe off, you actually have to pronate so that you can push off of your toes.
Okay. Yeah.
So it has to happen. It's a good thing.
It's just part of the biomechanics.
Yeah. And what tends to happen is our brain is all the time providing information from our environment and weighing up where to put our foot. And so the more we have underneath our foot, the more that kind of alters the way in which our body naturally responds to the loads that we are running over. Mm-hmm. So unless it's needed for a medical reason, a lot of the time we spend time removing orthotics and people feel better.
Oh, wow. Good to know. One of the aims here at this clinic is to make yourself redundant. Yeah. And quote you, "My goal is to make myself redundant, aiming for people to have such an insight into their pain or problem that they have all the tools to self-manage." So I want to work through a bit of that process now, going from diagnosing, which you've talked about a little bit, and choosing a team to help you manage your injury, and then kind of what happens after that. At what point do you need to start seeking help? I guess your red flags before cover some of that.
I think that's hard to know. It's hard to know when to go and seek help. I think if you've tried a few things and something's persisted for more than a couple of weeks, if you can't do what you want to be able to do, go and ask someone. I guess it's our job. It's your doctor's job to talk together to rule things out. So seeking help can be good. It can clarify things, get you back on track quicker rather than having a lengthy delay of don't I run, waiting. So sometimes it's better to check it early so that we can say, hey, we've just screened this. It's all fine. See ya. See you later. So I guess we go through the process of assessment. Then we might trial some things for treatment. We're then reassessing all the time and I guess having a working diagnosis. Still coming back to our assessment. Does this follow our pattern of expectations for prognosis? But I think the one thing that we don't need to get to is to be completely pain-free to discharge someone. Physiology is an amazing thing, and we're talking about tissue healing all the time, and tissues heal really well in generally 6 to 12 weeks. Okay. So if pain has become persistent beyond that, we start talking to people more about why that might be the case. And how to manage that persistent pain that's often not due directly to tissue-based injury.
Because that should be over by a baby.
And we see this all the time in our worlds. If you have a paper cut, it might take weeks to heal fully, but it generally isn't sore for all of those weeks.
No.
And pain serves as a protective purpose, and so sometimes we have pain to make us go and seek out help. And from an evolutionary perspective, I guess that's kind of how we evolved as humans, is to have this pain system that kept us safe. And if that pain system kicked in after we'd injured ourselves, it's not much help to us.
No.
And I'll come back to the paper cut example, but having pain with a paper cut, it can be a good thing. It tells you, all right, don't put your finger on that object. We don't want an infection. And so understanding the meaning of pain and what it's there to do, and is it a helpful thing?
Can it get unhelpful? Can your brain start to get overprotective?
Very much so.
And imagine pain, essentially.
Well, not even imagine it, but actually truly create it. Yeah, so that is a really tricky concept, and that's primarily what we do. We see runners, but actually bulk of our work is dealing with people with this persistent pain, when pain has persisted for longer than 3 months after they've had an injury, when we've got scans and all sorts of things and they have come back clear.
Yeah.
And we can often see it in people that have had pretty nasty injuries before, and they've had experiences that have not been very good. And so their pain system is kind of a bit more easily sensitized to a threat or to something that is likely to potentially cause them harm, or is whether it's a real threat or a perceived threat. If it's threatening enough to your system, your body will produce pain in an attempt to keep you safe.
So essentially your brain can overreact based on past experience.
Yep. And if we didn't have that, we wouldn't be good as humans. Like, we have to have this system that adapts to our world and that updates when we learn things.
Yeah.
A metaphor is a bit like if you have a car and you're driving down the street, and every time you went over a bump, you hit a bump, your horn went off and your alarms went off and your windows went up and down. It's not very helpful then.
No.
It's only helpful when someone's in your way.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what happens with the pain system, is it can be more easily ignited, and it can maintain that state of pain longer and for much easier.
So how do you help people when you suspect that that's what's happening? Because obviously to them, they think it's real and they think they're really injured.
Yeah. I think the big thing is us saying that this is a real thing that's happening. Like, their pain is very real, and making people feel understood in that regards, because often they've been dismissed by a lot of people before they get to us. So we have to be fully sure that everything has been excluded. Yeah. That might mean getting more tests done, speaking with the medical professionals. But once we're really confident that that has been done, it's all about starting to do some gradual exposure. Our pain system works fairly similarly to our fear system. And if there's enough information that says we've done this before, we didn't have a good experience, it's unlikely that they're going to have a great experience to start with. So I guess it's like finding a threshold that they're comfortable working with, and then slowly through enough repeated exposure, their pain system, their brain, it adapts, and it doesn't make these assumptions anymore that task is dangerous and we can do more. But you're right, the pain that becomes persistent can really restrict our task choice, and it can really hold us back in life.
Yeah. Definitely.
And I use running a lot as a tool for people, not trail runners, but we've had a lot of patients come through here that are struggling with pain, and they've gotten into park run or trail running because it's just this thing they didn't think they could do. And we try it and say, well, hey, is there a reason why we can't? And it feels good. And then they slowly do more and the pain goes away.
Hey, that's wonderful.
So running can be a rehab tool as well.
One of your other main rehab tools here is strength work.
Mm-hmm.
Really get people into that. I had never gone to the free weights section of the gym until coming here. So you build people's resilience and work with people in the rehab through strength work. So do you want to talk a bit about the role strength work plays in trail runners, rehab, and also prehab as well?
In terms of strength training, I think the first thing is that, again, we don't have specific research that says being stronger reduces risk of injury. Strength training, though, can be a great way to load your body, to get it used to the loads and demands that running puts on it, so that when you go and do that, you don't have that same response or that protective response. And by adding more load, then you can tolerate more load, and you should be able to produce force faster, perform a bit better, do a bit more before you hit fatigue. And I guess if we look at in trail running, what muscles get fatigued, generally the longer you're running, the more you're using your calf muscles. So we'll really hone in on all the muscles used in running, which are predominantly your quads, your calves, and your hamstrings in a fairly passive way. And looking at whether they've got the capacity to do what you want to be able to do with them.
And teach them what they can actually handle as well.
Yes.
Yeah. More than we think.
More than we think, yeah. And so I guess we use strength training and strength testing to look at someone's physical capacity and see what is stopping us going further. Is it a particular muscle group that we could work on, that I could do more with, or is it fear, or is it pain, or what is it?
Yeah.
Or is it flexibility?
Yeah, what's holding you back?
What's holding you back?
So with strength training, what do you recommend you should do? Like how many times a week, and how long are the sessions for, and all that? People like to have time frames, and I know it's not that easy, but what are some base recommendations?
Yeah, I think in terms of frequency, being able to go to the gym and do some strength training twice a week is good, and that's been shown to have enough kind of repetitions and frequency for your body to adapt. So 2 times a week is good. More than that, I think you're then trading off time that you're running, and really at the end of the day, to get good at running, you need to run. So I think it's 1 session is great, 2 sessions really good, short, sharp, punchy. I would generally spend 45 minutes maximum.
Max.
Okay, yeah. And you could start with doing, finding a weight that you feel comfortable with for like 8 to 12 reps. And then what we would generally do is, as we push people up with their weights, because we're looking for maximal output for the time and input that you're putting in. Yeah. So if you can go to the gym and do, 40 reps of something, but you could also go and do maybe like 5 punchy reps and do it a few times over and get the same result, we go with that.
Yeah.
So the heavier you go, the less you would do. So we might then take people up into that higher 80% of their 1 rep max zone, but only do like 5 or 6 reps. Yeah. Have good quality rest. Rest is important, about 2 minutes rest between sets.
Wow.
Yeah, quite a long time.
Yeah.
And then do more sets of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just build up to kind of
as you
big
go
weights,
heavier, you can't do as many.
Fewer reps.
Yeah. And they'll depend on what you're doing and what you're trying to get out of it. So it might be the opposite with something like hopping and loading. So something we use a lot is hopping with a weight plate. And that might be something that we're just looking at time on your, time and how many reps you're doing in a certain period of time. And so we might just string that out to be longer and longer.
Yeah, I assume you'd recommend a lot of single leg stuff for runners.
Yeah. Not necessarily though. So I think a really good place to start is with double leg tasks, because you can build someone's confidence and load in their system really quickly. Yeah. So we're pretty biased with using squats and deadlifts for that, because it uses multiple body muscle groups.
Yeah.
Then we might head towards the single leg route of doing some single leg deadlifts or step ups or 1-legged sit to stands or single leg press. So it just depends what you're trying to achieve.
Okay. Going back to physical injuries, what are some of the common problems that you talked about, the areas in which people feel pain and how it doesn't come down to pronation or some of the shoes or some of the things that we think, but what are some of the common things that are causing injuries in runners? The kind of, I'd love $1 for every time it's this.
Yeah, anterior knee pain, patellofemoral pain, or front of knee pain.
Yeah. And what's behind that? What's happening to cause injuries like that?
Yeah, again, that's one that we see most commonly with sudden changes in load.
Okay.
So there's some contributing factors, but the main things we will look at is, what's been happening, get your Strava up, we'll look at the past few months, years or whatever. Yeah. It's a loading problem. It's a load tolerance
So I think people's first protocol is usually to look at how's my foot landing, how am I holding my hips, like to examine their gait and their posture. And you're saying
we're not discounting that
that's
altogether.
Obviously important, but your main protocol is history, running history. What's going on?
Because when we have corrected technique in the past, or we've gone really down the path of loosening muscles, there was the foam rolling epidemic where everyone was foam rolling their ITBs, and that was going to help their knee pain or their lateral thigh pain, and it just doesn't change it. So they've put a whole bunch of funding in to look at why we got this front of knee pain, and the things it comes down to are loads. What are you doing? How are you tolerating your loads? How are you spending your time in your week? Are you avoiding things that hurt, and why is that the case? How are you moving to avoid these things? And is that a contributing factor?
So, like, if you're sore on one side, you develop a bit of a limp and not even realise of an imbalance?
Or just like little habits and things that we do. Like, I'll see people not fully bending their knee when they sit down, or not going up the stairs in the normal way and dragging that leg behind them.
So these subconscious habits.
That over months mean that we are now unloading that leg and expecting a lot out of it when your body and your pain system is going, whoa, and it's learned to associate bending your knee or leaning on it or running on it as being dangerous, and so it's got this pain. But other things in terms of frontal knee pain that we look at a lot are what's your quad strength like, what's your glute strength like as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what place does foam rolling have, if any? All the little balls and the spiky balls and the sticks and, fills the aisles of Rebel Sport and all those places. What is the efficacy of any of those at all?
There isn't any good efficacy that it changes your muscles. There isn't any good efficacy that says that it changes your fascia.
Because I've definitely been told that by someone before, to loosen my fascia.
I think
spiky ball.
Well, the amount of force that it would require would not be able to be done with a spiky ball. It would be more like, I think they did a study where they looked at a cadaver, and they looked at their ITB and they deformed it and they applied pressure, and it took something like 2 tons for that structure to change. So, that's not to say that it's bad and to not do it. I say to people that it has a place if it's part of your kind of mental routine, I think. Yeah. It's okay to know what it does, and it's good to know what it doesn't do. I think if it's part of your routine and it makes you feel good, it's like pre-race, great. But if you're spending a lot of time doing that and stretching and rolling when you could be spending time doing other things, I don't have much spare time. So I just look at it as, well, if I could spend $1 here or spend $1 there, I'll spend it at the gym or I'll spend it going for a run than lying down for 20 minutes on the roller.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then it essentially comes back to what your brain believes. If you truly believe that it's helping you and you actually enjoy doing it, go for it. Because your brain will believe what you're telling it, and you will actually feel different because of that.
But what it's not doing is changing your muscle or fascia structure structurally. There's definitely some perceptual things with applying something that hurts. Like, we all know that it can feel good sometimes to have someone just make something hurt, push into something that hurts into our muscles. So, you can utilise it for that, but probably it's mostly placebo effect. But that can be good too. That can be good too.
I think there might be a lot of listeners that are adding up how much all their little balls and sticks have cost them.
Yeah, I wouldn't invest too much.
You talked earlier about, you probably come to a physio unless it was something very obviously wrong after a couple of weeks of trying to deal with it yourself. In those early stages where you are trying to deal with it yourself, what are some things you're saying? Don't just stop running.
Yeah.
Unless if it's something that bad, you go see someone.
I think the other thing is, it doesn't, the severity of your pain doesn't necessarily have to dictate when to see someone. So we would see people, I'm trying to think how often we would see people in the really early acute phase. Not very often. We will normally see people after they've been a bit stubborn and months down the track.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Which is really hard then, because those 3 months have passed. This pain has persisted beyond when we would have expected tissues to heal. It's then much harder for us to deal with. Yeah. So if we can really get onto something early, it's less likely that it's going to become persistent.
And are you more likely to be dealing then with the actual problem? I imagine as something accumulates over time, you get more referral.
It's a bit easier to assess, and we can look at that loading and we can correlate things there and then, rather than have to go back over months. Yeah. And then you've spent months where you might have rested, or you might have moved differently, or you might have avoided stuff, or read lots of unhelpful things on the internet and developed these beliefs that might not be helpful. So it's good to just go and ask someone early days, and if you're not happy with what they say, go and ask someone else.
Yeah. Easy. So do you have any other top tips to do with injury prevention or handling injury or rehab?
I think just thinking about why you run, what you want to get out of running. Scheduling in rest days is good. Looking at your energy levels, which we didn't talk a lot about, but I have, when we're talking about stress fractures a bit before, I'm really passionate about trying to stop people getting down the red S pathway. So that's called relative energy deficiency in sport. We used to call it the female athlete triad, but we then acknowledged that actually there's men in the world too, and they can get this condition. Which I
think Maria mentioned last week that she's been talking about the triad. She didn't have the word female in front of it, but
that's pretty much it. Yeah. So it's the combination of, I guess, not enough energy in to what you're taking out. This is easier to see and assess in women generally because we menstruate. And so one of the first things that we see, we don't talk about it much, and it's something that's kind of considered normal to just not have your period if you're running a lot. Coming from, as a young person in athletics, it was definitely that way. It was just, you don't get it, don't worry. But that's really our body's sign of how we're doing hormonally. And if we've not got energy for our basic kind of life and physiological functions, something isn't right. So
that's a pretty primal life function.
Yeah, it is. And for us, we're seeing a lot of people now changing to more of a vegan-based diet, which can have wonderful benefits for them. But one of the things we have to be really careful about is managing their iron levels and their calcium levels and things like that, so that they actually do get enough energy in for the energy out. So it's that's something that I think is worth always thinking about, is like, what are your energy levels like? And if you're training really hard and you're waking up feeling really fatigued all the time, take note of that and go and chat with your GP, because what they generally do for this is do a bunch of blood tests. So we send people off pretty frequently to sports docs to get those tests done.
What are your calcium levels? What are your iron levels? Vitamin D levels?
And hormone-specific hormone tests for both men and women, which will pick up on those sorts of trends. Because if we are not getting our energy from somewhere, what tends to happen is we'll draw that from our bones. So it is something worth giving a lot of thought to. And that's what I'll say to people, like, why do you run? Are you trying to get out of running? What's your diet like? Are you getting enough nutrients in? And then work with a dietitian or someone that can actually make sure your energy requirements do meet your demands.
That sounds like excellent advice. I think I should line up a nutritionist. I'll finish this triad of, hip fractures to
that would be
physio.
Good. That would be really good.
A nutritionist, The triad.
The new triad.
The new triad. Thank you so much for today. I'll finish the same question I asked Maria last week. What events have you got? It's the beginning of the year. What's on your calendar coming up this year?
You know what's on my calendar. On my calendar this year is the slowest, longest run I've ever done, the Hubert 50. Just because I like Flinders Ranges. I think it will be fun.
That'll be cool. One of the things I'll try and do at some point is race reports, and that's probably my first interesting event of the year.
Okay.
I'm going back to marathon. The first big event I ever did was the marathon at Hubert. So I'll be up there doing that. There's a ton of people up there, so we'll have to have a
worthy race report.
Post-race campfire chat at the finish line.
Champagne at the finish line.
Michelle Hanlon, are you listening? You've provided champagne before. Bring it on.
Toasted marshmallows and champagne for anyone that makes it to the finish.
As people come over the finish line, how'd you go? That would be pretty cool. So we'll try and line that up. But thank you so much again for your time today.
No worries.
And like I said, how to contact you will be in the show notes, and I'll try and look up that Nitschke study and the Ross Tucker
I can give you a
podcast.
Few links. I'll make sure
and we'll put all that on there for those people listening. So thanks again, Emma.
No worries. Thanks, Mary. Bye.
Bye.